Fine?
Aye.
I'll just pound the table.
Pound the table.
We will begin the May 16th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. A current copy of the act is available at this meeting. Madam Clerk, can you please take roll?
Dean Schulte,
Here?
Here.
Hamer,
Here.
Blonsky,
Here.
Creashaw,
Here.
Lohr,
Here.
Roth, Schilling,
Here.
Council President Augustine Schulte. The roll has been called.
Thank you. Our first item on the agenda tonight, our only item, is the creation of a Columbus Reserve Firefighters. And we'd like to have Chief come up and give us some information on this, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Administrator, Mr. President, and members of council. I'm Ryan Gray, Fire Chief, City of Columbus Fire Department, and I stand before you tonight in the name of accountability, safety, fiscal responsibility, asking for change. When I applied for this job and as I was going through the process, one of the things that genuinely appealed to me was the fact that this system was a combination system, using both career and volunteer firefighters to accomplish the mission. Having been a longtime volunteer myself, I understand the passion to serve and what it means to give back to your community in that capacity. I felt my time as an informal leader within a very successful volunteer department would allow for me to be a positive influence on the system here and implement some good change. What I found when I arrived was not what I expected. Upon my arrival, I heard from many different people that the relationship between career and volunteer was at an all-time low. The volunteers were in the middle of an investigation involving the misuse of city funds. There were no minimum membership requirements or training standards in place for our volunteers, and there's a general lack of accountability and no clearly defined authority within the system. Therefore, I was instructed to present a plan to address these issues, which is why I'm here this evening. It is my job as fire chief to approach things from a strategic level and work to build a sustainable system for decades to come, which is why I'm asking you all tonight to approve the creation of the Columbus Reserve Firefighters to replace the 4 current volunteer companies within the city. Currently, there are 4 individual companies that exist within the department consisting of 22 active members. According to Nebraska law, each company can have up to 25 members on the roster. Currently, we don't have enough to support 1, yet continue to fund and support 4. Going to 1 company or reserves will not change the amount of active personnel we have or negatively impact service delivery. In fact, it will improve it by implementing standards and ensuring accountability. Last fiscal year, the city budgeted $103,000 for the operation of the volunteer companies. This program is expected to cost $88,564, which includes salary, Social Security, workers' comp, training, and uniforms. Up until the 3rd of this month, I've been extremely open and transparent about my plan, answering all the questions I've been asked, providing updates as things change, and making myself available anytime to discuss the proposed changes. I stand here tonight feeling as if I have not had the same in return. The volunteers on the 3rd of this month advised me they retain legal counsel to mainly focus on the trust funds of the volunteers. However, after hearing the comment that the lawyer will be present for this meeting this evening, my thoughts changed. Every meeting I've attended of the 4 companies and the department meeting last month has gone into closed session, which means myself or any other career staff must leave the room. This very clearly tells me there's a double standard, as the volunteers expect open lines of communication and transparency, but are not willing to give it in return. What is the perception when the fire chief cannot sit in a meeting involving the volunteer component of the department? In the weeks leading up to this meeting, I've had many discussions with the volunteers about the proposed requirements of this program. These requirements include all personnel who will be operating as firefighters in an IDLH, immediately dangerous to life or health, environment to be certified at the Firefighter 1 and Hazmat operations level as outlined in NFPA 1001. I've been told by the volunteers that Nebraska NFPA is not the law and there are no legal requirements to have such certification, which to that point I acknowledge and I agree. However, just because it's not the law does not mean we would not be held to that standard in the case of a claim or a lawsuit. In fact, lawsuits arising out of firefighter line of duty deaths and injuries reference NFPA standards on a regular basis. Any attorney would seek to use the industry standards as evidence, and in the fire service, NFPA standards are the definitive standards that knowledgeable attorneys will default to. In addition to the standard, I'm proposing a minimum response requirement of reserve personnel responding to a minimum of 20% of all task force alarms annually. These task force alarms are the calls that include structure fires, brush fires, and auto accidents with reported entrapment. These high acuity calls require the largest number of personnel to respond and mitigate the incident. As the fire chief, my number 1 priority is the safety of the citizens and visitors of the city of Columbus and the safety of all personnel under my command. In addition to that, I have the obligation to the city to ensure that policies, procedures, and training align with definitive standards to the greatest extent possible in an effort to reduce liability to the city, our city leaders, and our local government. Failure to implement these standards could be considered grossly negligent when it comes to legal actions. I've heard a few times from some volunteers that I'm just a volunteer. This past week, I came across a podcast from a 30-year veteran in the fire service and past volunteer chief, Brian Solar. And during his podcast, he mentions this phrase and says this: regardless if you put the word volunteer before firefighter or professional before firefighter, the one word that is common in both of these titles is still firefighter. And that job does not change. People, your customers, your community, your neighbors, your friends next door, and the people driving through your community depend on you, and they depend on you on the worst days of their lives. It is irresponsible for the fire department to continue to operate in the manner in which we currently operate. We must realize that the way the system has worked in the past is no longer what is best for our city. The department has operated for too long under the acceptance of accidental success and unsafe practices. This normalization of deviance has shown itself and provided us an opportunity for change. I've heard it said from volunteers in the system, we are not one department. How can this be? We all wear the same gear, ride the same trucks, are expected to respond to the same calls, and should all be here to provide a service to the community. If this is the ideology that some of our volunteers have, how can anyone expect me to run an effective and efficient department? How can anyone expect me to run two different departments as one? I understand the fear of change. However, change is necessary. How can anyone legitimately argue against standards and accountability in a service where it is expected to exist? If the last question of a 911 call is, sir, ma'am, would you like me to send the certified firefighters or the non-certified firefighters? How do you think our citizens would respond? Our citizens deserve the same level of service when they dial 911, regardless of their status as a career or volunteer firefighter. To me, this is simple, and I have the benefit of not having been here to have experienced the history of the department or to have built relationships that could affect my decision-making. However, I feel that history or personal relationships should never hold us back from positive change. As leaders, we are the decision makers, and whatever you're not changing, you're choosing. I stand here tonight not choosing mediocrity or the normalization of deviance, but attempting to move away from the way we've always done it. As Deputy Chief Frank Viscuso says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. This is an unbiased assessment of where we currently sit as a department, and it has to change. The city provides funding to the volunteer department, therefore should fall under city control and be accountable to them. The idea behind the reserve program was not only to implement standards and requirements, but to clearly identify responsibility and authority within the department and to assure accountability. The creation of this program is not meant to be detrimental to the volunteers, but to provide some incentive to the members that this would affect by offering a level of compensation for their sacrifice and hopefully be used as a recruitment and retention tool to address the overall lack of membership. I cannot express enough that this is not an effort to push people out the door. I realize and understand that we cannot provide the service that is expected of us without our volunteers. The caveat to this is the volunteers have to be trained, certified, and show up when seconds count. If approved tonight, be confirming to the citizens of the city that you do in fact have their best interest in mind. Regardless of whether you're a career or volunteer, as a firefighter, your number one priority should be to do everything in your power to provide the citizens with the highest level of service. Without the citizens, we have no purpose. We exist to solve problems. It is my intent that with your approval tonight to fully implement the program by August 15th, 2022. This will allow time for a collective effort to finalize the Constitution and bylaws of the reserves, as well as finalize the proposed changes to city code. Additionally, this will allow for those interested in being a part of the program moving forward to meet and discuss any items they feel necessary before committing fully. I'd like to think that the days of a lack of leadership, failure to communicate, and backdoor political influence are behind us. We collectively need to move forward in a positive direction, not continue to focus on the good old days and kick the can down the road. These changes are necessary and vital to the success of the fire department and to the city. Excuse me, I lost my spot here. We have a collective obligation to do what is right for our community, even if it may hurt some feelings or change the look of the department as we've known it. This does not negate the positive impact our volunteers have had on our community over the decades of existence and sacrifice, but builds on the foundation they've laid for us to continue to grow on. Thank you for your time this evening, and I ask that you approve this plan in an effort to reduce liability, ensure accountability, establish clear lines of authority, implement minimum standards, and most importantly, provide the highest level of service to the citizens of the City of Columbus. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Council members, do any of you have a question for Chief Gray?
Chief, at one point in time, you talked about a volunteer fire department historical society. Could you
Yes.
elaborate on that a little bit?
So that idea, the basis of that idea actually came from a volunteer, Captain Natalie Porter, who wanted somewhere for the people who had given the 20, 30, 40 years of service to go, somewhere for them to still be involved. I know, I want to say, Chief, it was Omaha that you told me has a historical society, which would be just that, a society of those individuals who could be their 501c3 nonprofit organization and still work to preserve the history and the traditions of the Columbus Fire Department. It just wouldn't be a city organization. They'd be more than welcome to use the building, and we bring them in for history classes for our academies and all those things. But I agree. This is a huge change, and you don't want to lose those types of individuals. But my concern is the coming to a call, responding to calls, being trained, providing that service. I think the historical society would be great. I'd love to see that, and I would do anything in my power to help make that possible. So that's where I stand on that. I do think it would be a good program if they were interested in doing that.
Thank you.
Numbers on the, in the reserve.
Numbers?
What number are you looking for?
I'd like 40, but I think more realistically it would be 30 to 35 over time. I don't know what that number would look like initially. I know we've probably got 12 to 15 that I know would probably swing over and start the reserve program. And we have 12, 13 interested now in the academy that we would start up next. So that'd be another 13 individuals, bringing us close to that 30 mark. But using the reserve program and that compensation as a little bit of a recruitment and retention tool to get the people in the door and provide it. It's hard to get away from your family. When you talk a little bit of money, that may be just enough. None of us are in this job for the money. I can assure you that, but just enough to make that commitment.
Okay, say the reserves, they're gonna have a job beside.
Sure.
Okay, is there any criteria that you're gonna have to, that you're gonna have to get off your job, that sort of thing?
As far as like allowing someone to leave their place of employment, from what I hear, that doesn't happen a whole lot anymore. I think it's definitely worth a letter out to the employers that, hey, these are, if you could, we would like for you to let our members
I was
off.
wondering if there was some sort of a document that, if you become a reserve, you need to take this to your employer.
Well,
and say, here's where I'm at.
And if I've read the law correctly, there's that requirement now to notify your employer, and there are protections for volunteers for that particular reason. And we could definitely,
I
offer
would
that.
say that's something we would want to do, because, I hate
100%.
to have one of our firefighters go out and, leave his job and end up, next day not having one,
Right. Yes, there are legal protections for volunteers to keep from happening.
Chief, can you kind of go over your outline of what your requirements are going to be?
Sure. So as of right now, and this document, the Constitution and Bylaws, which would outline that, is still in draft form. Like I mentioned, I think I've got the draft there, but I think it needs to be built by those who would be participating. 20% of task force alarms annually. There's an EMT only option, which could be an hours requirement. It could be a backup requirement. That's something that I think right now, especially after discussions, that needs to go back to them for them to decide what's appropriate, what's doable, and then build out those requirements. And like I said, I'm open to suggestions and working through that process. But we've got to take the first step in getting this approved. I can give you the bylaws right now and say go, but it's not fair to those who it would affect directly. So I think that's kind of still up in the air. I have a basis of what I'd like to see, but I'm 100% open to having those discussions and determining what really is the best route for us.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody, Mr. Barr, you didn't have a comment? No. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make any comments or have anything else to contribute to the discussion? Please come forward and state your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Jojo Dunham, the president of Local 1575 Columbus Professional Firefighter Association. Good evening, thanks for your time. So I stand before you again to discuss the paid reserve program for the Columbus Fire Department. To be straight, the professional firefighters of Columbus are in complete support of Chief Gray's proposal for a firefighter paid reserve program. Having a paid reserve program will provide for many needs of the current fire department, including safety, accountability, fair standards, and a pool of already trained candidates in hiring future staff. It also provides some incentive for the reserve personnel to respond to more calls. As an elected representative of the career firefighters, my first priority is the safety and well-being of the members. Having the reserve program will solve many of the safety concerns that the career staff have. First of all, this program will allow for properly trained reserve firefighters to back up, assist, and work with the paid staff. As of the current time, you never know if any firefighters that are going to respond to a call have the proper training and experience to do the job safely and properly. The career staff is usually the primary response to most calls. We rely on the volunteers to back us up, to watch our backs, and to work with us to accomplish our mission of saving lives and protecting property. On the occasions when the volunteers are the first due response, the career staff being busy with other calls, the reserve program will ensure that the citizens calling for help will receive the best service possible. Having accountability is essential to run any organization. The reserve program will provide that accountability by having and enforcing policies and standards. This also ties into safety. Proper policies and standards are designed to keep staff safe and honest, as well as reduce liability. Currently, the volunteer companies make most of their own rules, policies, and standards without oversight from the city, and much of the time without approval of the fire chief. What successful government agency is allowed to make their own rules without approval of the government supervisors, let alone one that receives funding from the city? To the career staff, this is absolutely ridiculous. There is no way to ensure safety and honesty, let alone reduce liability. That's a recipe for disaster. The reserve program will also allow for fair standards with the reserves as compared to the career staff. This also ties into safety. Currently, the only volunteer staff that are required to have the basic firefighter certification of Firefighter 1 are the new members. They are required to attend the volunteer academy where they receive this certification and are trained on the way we do things here at CFD. The more veteran group has no requirement to have any certification or firefighting. The career staff is required to have a minimum Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, and EMT. Most of us go on to become paramedics and receive many other fire certifications. If God forbid a major injury or line of duty death were to occur, the government and the courts will look at what training standards the department has in place and the policies created and enforced. This puts a tremendous liability on the officers of the department and the government of the city of Columbus as a whole. Another major concern the career staff has is volunteer response. Currently, the career staff does not know if any help will arrive to assist with a job. During my 9 years with the department, I've been on many fires with just 3 to 4 personnel. NFPA 1720 recommends a minimum of 15 staff respond to all structure fires within, I believe, 9 minutes. How will we ever come close to meeting this standard with no response requirements? The last few years of response statistics is proof alone that the current system is broken. You've all seen these numbers, and they're very troubling. There is so little response that it makes the job even more dangerous than it already is. If the staff that shows up, if they're even properly trained. On the overlapping ambulance calls, there is almost no volunteer response at all. Having a paid reserve reserve program will allow some incentive for reserves to respond and help mitigate some of the risk involved in firefighting. It will also provide better service to the citizens of this great community, which that's what the job's about. All of you, keep in mind this no way discounts the many years of service that the volunteers provided in the past. This union local is not anti-volunteer. The union local knows the need for having backup staff to protecting and serving the city, as well as maintaining fiscal responsibility. There are a handful of well-trained and active volunteers currently on the department, and we sure do hope that those members continue into the paid reserve program. As you can see, there's no good reason to not approve this reserve program. The current system simply does not meet the needs of the city or the career staff. Ask yourselves this. If you were a firefighter in our current volunteer system, would your spouse be comfortable sending you into a burning building or sending you down a hole on ropes to rescue someone? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the audience? Please state your name and your address.
Yes, my name is Gregory Johnson, 1522 9th Street. I'm on the active reserves right now. I've been with the department for 30 years. I took a non-active role a couple of years ago, partially due to some health and partially the new chief had brought in some training requirements that were what I felt to be above and beyond what a volunteer, just about anybody, would possibly have time for. One example, when the new chief, and I'm talking the prior chief, we've had 3 chiefs in my, 4, but 3. So I believe his name was Miller. I believe that he made a requirement that all volunteers every week got online and took a training with a follow-up test. If you had a good computer, good service, if you were a speed reader, and if you got that test all correctly, if everything was in it was maybe an hour and a half. But for myself and most, it was a several-hour process, and we did have several people indicated that it really wasn't possible. And that's just an example of something that when the system changed from Chief Hefty to the next chief, obviously there were changes. Obviously, there's always going to be a training concern, and that was one way that a concern was addressed, is putting the volunteers on a computer for several hours with good information. But that is one thing out of many that were all of a sudden requirements for the volunteers. And I'm not saying that any training is bad. It's all good. The Jojo made a point there. So under that system, the system is broke. That's what I'm hearing. That's what Jojo just said. Well, that system that's broken is the system that's been in place since, I'm just going to say, back to Dean Hefty. Because when Dean Hefty was chief, I heard people saying amongst themselves, oh, this guy, this, that. There's always grumbling. But I didn't hear anybody publicly say this system is broke. When Dean Hefty was here, it was a system. It worked. You all made a choice. You brought in a new chief. This chief instigated changes, good or bad. They were changes. They happened. And now the result of that, our new chief is having to deal with that, quote, broken system, according to Jojo. One of the things the prior chief, Miller, had indicated was a policy of volunteers do not go to the scene. If the house across the street from me, down here on south side of town, I don't go to that scene. I go to the fire barn, 7 minutes if I'm speeding across town. Get on a rig and then come back to the fire. Now, granted, in reality, nobody would do that. I wouldn't. I shouldn't say reality. Myself, I would never do that. If there was a heart attack when there was down in my vicinity years ago, I went straight to the call. If there was something I could make a difference in, especially if I knew I could beat the unit, I would go there. And I started on originally, primarily, as an EMT. That was my original reason for joining the department. I was an EMT in Albion. And when I came here, they go hand in hand, the fire and the EMT. So the numbers that you all have heard about, will be hearing, have to do with response times, number of people on a code, or number of people on a call. The number of people on a call, you probably have that in front of you if you've heard it. Low. So, how about the response time? Now, I believe it was Tara back, I don't know, when we were putting bids out on the new station, indicated we're a long ways away. We got people down here on the south side of town that don't have, it's going to be an issue, and we'll discuss that. I don't know how many years ago that article was. I sure could have brought it, but it was in excess, I believe, of 6 years. So the point being is, for 6 years or 5, 6, 7, it was public information that that south side of town was weak on time. People getting a call there, we were weak on that. If volunteers down there were allowed to go, firemen were allowed to go, we had somebody on the site. So that's just kind of a policy change that happened this prior chief. That's an example. I would like to ask the council members, and I don't know procedure, but maybe to make it quick, Rich, have you, in the last, since the concept of doing away with the volunteers and going to this paid career, have the public, has anybody from the public in your constituency indicated any knowledge or questions or comments?
In regard to just,
Basically, the new reserve program here that we're here for tonight for, and exiting the volunteer program.
people have contacted me, yes.
3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20?
Like 3 or 4.
Would it be safe to say, okay. Dennis, have you had anybody contact you regarding this?
Not really contact me, but just in visiting with other people that have not called me up or anything, but general talking to people around town or that I'd run into, they would mention, is there a problem between the volunteer department and the career employees? And I said, well, I hear a lot of rumors, but I'm not up to date on what's all going on. But I've had 3 or 4 people mention that to me.
Thank you. Beth, Augustine, please.
Well, I guess first of all, I want to ask you're asking council members for input. I guess I wouldn't want to know what is the
Oh, certainly.
motive for getting feedback from each one, because I think if
Well-
anyone has heard anything, they would share that. So I guess I'm wondering, first of all.
Oh, well, certainly. Everybody I've talked to, and I don't know a lot of people, but I know a few thousand here in town. And whenever I mention it to them, the events of this reserve program and the change that's looking like it very well may be on its way, 0 people have told me they've heard anything about it. So my question is if you are representing the people in your area, in your district, if they don't know anything about it, and now you're going to take a vote on it, I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out, if somebody maybe has a district that's
So
knowledgeable.
are you saying then that you think that everybody in the community should be knowing about this reserve program before we take a vote on it? Is that what you're suggesting?
Oh, no, not at all. But you said that, and that's a good point. That's a good thing to consider.
That's what I'm asking. Is that your perspective? Is that
Well,
what you think?
my question is this. If back in the day, they said for every volunteer to replace it with a career firefighter, you may be looking at $500,000 per year increase in property taxes. That's what I'm looking at. Maybe it's $750,000, $1,000 when you talk about the monetary. So what I'm looking at it is from the monetary, the property taxpayers. What do the people whose taxes may, I don't know, maybe go up because of this situation we have, then then you who guide their tax money, you know, they need to be informed. So that's why I asked the question.
Yes, and I understand what you're saying. I think, though, that the chief has explained, though, that he's explained to us anyway, that this is going to offset itself, because the money that we are spending right now, there will be a change in what we'll be spending our money on. There will be things that we won't be spending money on, and we are going to have a savings in the long run when we add the active reserves. So that is my understanding. I have not had any call. I have spoken with some employed firefighters who have said to me that they are very excited about this change. And those are the people who I've talked to. But I'm not going to go around and spread hearsay what other people are saying. I'd like to ask you a question, though. Are you saying that you are against, or are you for having a reserve firefighter program?
Well, when I see what it is completely involved in, I will probably be for it, because I don't see a lot of other option right now.
All right, and that's good.
I don't see any other option, because from what I'm hearing and understanding, there's about to be a vote, regardless of what I say or think, and so.
If I may, I'm going to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Tonight, we are just giving the fire department a chance to continue restructuring and working on this. There is no definite program in place with tonight's vote. We're just simply giving the fire chief the permission to continue working on creating whatever documents, whatever needs to be done for this. That's what's being voted on tonight. We won't actually vote on the actual program until August. And so any communicating then with the citizens, that we still have lots of time for that conversation to take place.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Barr, have you had anybody contact you in the last month or two?
I have. More emails than phone calls.
How are people aware of this? Was there public information? Did they just hear rumor, or
Most of it, for the most part, I would say is hearsay.
just talk?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And I'm guessing most of them were just questions. They really didn't know what was going on and asking you what's going to happen.
And we're learning right along with you now.
You bet.
so.
You bet. Thank you. Mr. Lohr?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Schilling, have you had anybody contact you about this issue in the last few months?
I've had a couple of people ask me about it, and also I have talked to other people about it, and so that's just the conversation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Troy?
Yes, I've had a few.
Well, thank you for your time. My ultimate point would be that the public we all know Mr. Balin, and he signed me up 32 years ago. And Mr. Balin told me throughout his career that the reason he was in this volunteer fire department was here when he was born, and it was here when he died. And he wanted to make sure he stayed active because he wanted to make sure this city maintained its volunteer fire department. And the thing he told me was about property taxes. It was all about that. And did you have a comment, or did you bring to say?
I had a question for you, if it's all
sure,
right, Mr. Johnson. When you were a volunteer, were you a firefighter 1? Did you have that certification?
I took training with the fire school, and at that time it was not called Firefighter 1, and I would say no.
Okay.
I was specifically myself. I was geared towards EMT.
Okay, so you had that certification.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Obviously, the certifications that were required the entire time as a firefighter, I met those.
Mm-hmm.
The lingo Firefighter 1 was not in my vocabulary until I was halfway through to my understanding of what that involved.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Johnson, thank you for your feedback. We appreciate your time and communicating with us.
Yes.
Thank you.
And just for the record, thankfully, Bob Balin, when he was born, there was a volunteer fire department, and when he passed away, there was a volunteer fire department. And if nothing else,
Thank
Bob
you.
had his wish come true. I hope that somehow there can be a volunteer contingent in this new system. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
wish to.
Do we have anybody else that would like to bring forward? Yes?
Just for the record, my name is Jim Egger, spelled E-G-R. Good Irish name. It's Czech. And I am from David City, Nebraska. And my address for the record is 951 Bicentennial Circle, David City, 68632. I have gone into more consulting now after 48 years as a professional liar, so take that into consideration. Just as a background from my standpoint, I have completed 45 years as legal counsel for the Nebraska State Volunteer Firefighters Association and completed 45 years as an instructor at the Nebraska State Fire School, as well as instructor for volunteer fire departments for rural fire protection districts in the state of Nebraska, and conducting seminars throughout the state of Nebraska for cities and villages and for rural fire protection districts and fire departments. I am happy to say, and of course that may not sit well with the city council, I've been involved in the brand new constructions over those 45 years of 250 fire stations in the state of Nebraska, helping them with finding their funding sources and so forth. I'm here representing the Columbus Volunteer Fire Department, and I would say after meetings with them, I believe that they probably see the writing on the wall that the Volunteer Fire Department is going to go by the wayside in the city of Columbus. Eventually it will. And they asked me to come by after several meetings and just discuss with you about the situations with the proposed paid reserves. And I apologize to you, Mr. Mayor, and to the council and to the folks here for being late. I was advised the meeting was at 6:30 and not at 6 o'clock, so I apologize to you and ask for your understanding on that. I would suggest to you, and I don't know how you're going to handle, and I'm glad you said the discussion's going to go on, and then the vote's going to come in probably in August. I don't know if if the idea is to have that reserve unit, paid reserves, be a volunteer paid reserves. I'm kind of under the understanding and listening here so far that it's a volunteer paid reserve. And that becomes very important on what's going to happen with that paid reserve. Since some volunteers are going to be part of that paid reserve, there raises some questions. And I hope that there are notes taken about that situation. My first concern is always the volunteers. And if there is a volunteer on there, if there are volunteers on there and this is considered a volunteer paid reserve, then the first question comes up, workman's compensation. And why does workman compensation come into play? Because if a paid reserve, there are statutes that deal with what is considered a volunteer. And that's under the workman's compensation statutes. And that particular statute is 48-126.01. And that statute says that as long as somebody on a paid reserve or in a volunteer, and you have departments out there and cities out there that pay their people for call, okay? And as long as they do not earn more than 20% that their counterpart earns, so for example, if your career firefighters earn $50,000 a year, as long as they do not get paid more than that $10,000 or 20% of that, they are considered a volunteer. And therefore, they come under 48-115, which is the statute that says that volunteers are covered under workman's compensation. The question then comes in, if they earn more than 20% of their counterpart on the career, the question then comes in, if they get injured and they're paid over more than 20% of what their counterpart gets paid, then if they get injured and they're off of work a week, month, 5 months, whatever that situation is, their paid off time under workman's compensation will be based upon what they received as a paid reserve. Not what they get as a self-employed person or in their regular job. That becomes very important. And the workman's compensation statute says that if a volunteer gets injured in the line of duty, they get paid for their time off based upon what they earn in their regular job, or if they're self-employed, their maximum that they would get under workman's compensation. So that becomes very important. That becomes very important for these reserve people, and especially if what their status is going to be. You can't say, well, they're going to be paid reserved and so forth. Are they going to get paid per call? Are they going to get paid a particular salary, whatever? That all becomes very important under workman's compensation. Secondly, if they are considered volunteers under 48-12601, then they come under the group term life insurance of the Nebraska statutes, and that's been changed this year by the unicameral. That group term life insurance that they will be entitled to has been risen by the unicameral this year from $10,000 to $25,000. Also, the in line of duty death has been raised by the unicameral this year from $100,000 to $250,000. Plus, there is a cancer coverage if you die of cancer as a career firefighter. And I'm not quite sure about that. I have not had the chance to fully read that new statute. But there's a $50,000 life insurance coverage, which they would be entitled to under your reserve and I think also the career. So those become very important for these people entering into the paid reserve. And that's going to have a financial impact on the city in calculating what that's going to save or not save for the city. The other part, I want to make sure I got my notes covered here. Those are financial concerns on there, I think that you need to take a look at. The other animal out there is the funds of the volunteer fire department, okay? There's unicameral many years, well, yeah, it is many years ago. It was when, who was the state auditor? My name escapes, what?
Bob, somebody?
Yeah, he was painted. He was a pain in the behind to the state senators because he was auditing them and so forth. Okay. Anyway, unicameral passed the statute 35-901, allowing volunteer fire departments to create trust funds with the monies they earn from donations or from pancake feeds or sponsoring special little towns, the carnival and the fireworks and things like that. I worked with the Elkhorn Volunteer Fire Department when the city of Elkhorn was annexed by the city of Omaha. And you have to understand, you can't just end the volunteer fire department because there are trust funds that they hold, okay? And the Attorney General's office has a section on commerce and charities. And when those funds are addressed, if the volunteer fire department ends, boom, just like that, then the Attorney General's office, that section is going to come into play under the Commerce and Charities division there. And I worked with a lady named Abigail Stempson at that time, and she has moved up to Washington, D.C. now. And I've got a call into the Attorney General's office, and they were going to contact me this week about any particular changes that they may have. Now, they forced Elkhorn to enter into what they call, and they said, we have the right under what they call the Cypress Doctrine. I think we've got a city attorney here, and I hadn't remembered that since I was in law school. But they forced them to go into a trust. And that 35-901 is not a trust as you understand in estate planning or a husband and wife would create. It's a separate animal that was created by the unicameral at that time many years ago. And so you want to go through this process to make sure that all this is covered and this is dealt with before you get rid of the volunteer fire department and those trust fund matters are dealt with. The last thing you want to deal with, and the last thing the volunteer fire department or the career want to deal with is the AG's office on that charity section. You don't want to get tied up with them. And I'll tell you that right now. I've been in contact, and I would advise anybody who wants to call the AG's office now, I would advise against that, because I don't want to get, I would respectfully submit, you don't want to get that cranked up. Right now, I call them up, yes.
Oh, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to be sure we have time for anybody else who
Okay,
wants to
okay,
speak.
okay. And
So
I'm
if you
just
have
about-
your
I'm just
any
about
other
to-
points that you
Yeah.
feel
The
that we
other
need to be
point I wanna
concerned
make
about,
is,
please.
I know there was a suggestion by the union about creating it was I'll check my notes here.
Historical Society?
Yeah, the Volunteer Fire Department Historical Society. That will not work with the AG's office. I can tell you that right now. That will not work. And as a result, that will have to probably do the same thing they did in Elkhorn. There will have to be a trust created. That trust will have to be filed with the Platte County Court, and those monies will have to run through that situation to get permission from the court. I thank you for your time, and again, I apologize
Mr. Rager, just a quick question.
Yes.
In your 45 years' experience with volunteer fire, have you run into a situation like this before? And what was the end result?
Norfolk has a situation like that where they have the paid reserve. My most recent experience has been with Elkhorn.
Okay.
And that's what we had to end up doing with Elkhorn, is the Attorney General's office required us under what they call the Cypress Doctrine. I won't go into that animal. But we had to,
You're mostly talking about the insurance and workman's comp claims that tend to be significant to taxpayers.
yeah,
You know, the other funding that's a whole nother bailiwick.
that's a whole nother bailiwick. And
And so
the timing is
I
going
guess
to be important.
my more concern is how they handled the workman's comp, the
Well, what
life
happened there
insurance
is the Elkhorn Volunteer Fire Department ended up going out of existence, and they created a trust, and that handled those funds. Elkhorn is now covered by the city of Omaha. They're paid, they're career people. Okay.
Chief Gray, did you take notes on the questions he posed with workman's comp? Yep, all right.
And I've been doing some research and some work on that. Again, just another example of we don't need to push this through and make the final decision tonight. We need
Very
to
good.
get the approval to move forward with the program and then address those things as we move forward.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has not spoken that would like to share any input? Please state your name and your address.
Good evening. My name is Tino Carbajal, 2712 22nd Street here in Columbus. Good evening, Mayor, city administrators, and council members. As I mentioned, my name is Tino Carbajal, and I've been a member of the Columbus Volunteer Fire Department for almost 4 years now. I'm speaking tonight in support of all or any changes that the current volunteer department is going to go under. I joined the department for the same reason as I'm sure every member did, is to do good in the community and find a way to help in any way that I can. And whatever those changes are upon the horizon, I again want to express my support for them tonight. I know there's others, and they're present tonight, that have the same thoughts or same feelings that I have, and some that don't. But I want to start by saying that there has been lots of discussion the last 2 years or so within the department regarding on how to make improvements to the service to our community, and nothing has been done until now. The proposal to monetarily compensate volunteers was also one of the things that were suggested amongst other ideas to improve our recruitment and retention within the department. But now that Chief Gray has put some of that into action, I'm surprised by some of the negative comments by those same people that at one point said, if they expect us to make more calls, they should pay us. There has been, on more than one occasion, when I and others have suggested changes in order to make for more personnel accountability and better attendance to calls. And simply we've been shut down simply based on the fact that it's not how we used to do it. The resistance to change has hindered our departmental growth. It's just a fact that in the fire and EMS and in our community, change is always going to happen. Our community is growing, and we need to find a way to better serve our members. Plain and simple, that's just something that needs to be done, and pretty soon. I feel that part of this fear of resistance and change comes from the willingness and wanting to remain a part of the organization. And I'll be the first to admit, I'll be the first to thank all the brave men and women that were here as part of the Columbus Volunteer Fire Department before me, because they did help mold the department to become what it is today. In no way, shape, or form is my support for these changes a direct attack to get individuals that came before me out of the department. I feel that we should find a way or an opportunity for every member to remain a part of our department. My wish would be to find a role for each man or woman that wants to be a part of a member that's maybe not physically able to participate in fire or EMS calls, to find a different role such as traffic control at some of the scenes, driving an ambulance to a scene when one of the other either career or professional firefighters are on a different call, or simply driving an empty pickup truck to a scene at the end of a fire scene to help pick up hose. These are tasks that don't require hardly any physical ability. It's just simply going and helping, and it would be appreciated. There's current members in our department that are more than physically able to do that and more. And in the 3.5 years or so that I've been a member of, I haven't seen once at a scene, and some that I've seen once, maybe twice. And I'll remind the panel that I am one of the more active members, so I do show up to a fair amount of those emergency calls, and it just seems to me that they don't want to. It's not that they can't. In closing, I'd like to leave you by saying that we should have an open mind, all of us, to all these changes. Change is going to happen whether we want it or not. I suggest to not knock it till you tried it. At the end of the day, we are all members of this department by choice. No one here is being forced to be here. We have been volunteers here by choice, which gives you the ability to not be a part of this organization if you don't believe in it. I just ask that you don't get in the way to those of us who want to be a part of this department, regardless of any changes. Even if these changes one day turn into the city of Columbus no longer requiring my assistance, I'll assure you that I'll be proud of what I did when I could. Thank you.
Thank you. We only have a few minutes left, so if anybody else has something to share, please keep it as brief as you possibly can. You have to read really fast.
All right. Natalie Porter. I've been a volunteer for 6 years. I agree a lot with what Tino says, including keeping those on board that are willing to do the tasks that we're not going to do. We aren't going to bring a pickup to load hose and whatnot. But response has been dwindling, and it's very hard for volunteers to get away. The pay's not going to change how I respond. I show up when I can. But I've been to a couple retention and recruitment workshops, and that's brought up every time. So, I mean, I've personally left work or come in late to work, and it does make a difference when you miss a couple hours of work, and getting a little bit of pay would help with that, especially for those who it's a much larger deal, who have family and whatnot. But I do agree with having standards, including responses. I'm thankful I went and got my Firefighter 1. I learned a lot. And nothing to diminish those who gave decades. That I've learned a lot from them. I actually had an individual tell me about when gloves became a thing in EMS. So we have decades of experience on there, and I would really like to keep that experience around. I've learned a lot from them. I've learned a lot from the career, and I'm still learning a lot. I have a lot more to learn, but I would like you to consider the reserve program, and it's going to be a lot of hard changes, and it scares the hell out of me, but I'd like to give it a go. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments? Are you a fast reader? Speed reader?
I can read it real quick.
Go for it.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Calvin Novak, 2307 8th Street, apartment number 3. I've been on the volunteer fire department for a little over 1 year. I am a member of the Pioneer Hook and Ladder Company. My certifications are Firefighter 1 and Hazmat Ops. I respond to as many calls as I can, as well as man a station when additional personnel may be needed for that call or an overlapping call. Even though I am not EMS trained as of now, I am still able to bring extra EMS equipment, such as an ambulance, to our EMS trained personnel. As of right now, we don't have very many volunteers who are very active. I hope everyone who isn't active has a valid reason for not responding. I believe introducing a new program that would pay a select group from the volunteers that meet a standard requirement to receive pay with proper certifications and high enough response percentages would provide a huge benefit to everyone, especially the people of Columbus. If this program started, it would encourage more volunteers to respond more and to receive more training. It would benefit the volunteers that are able to leave work to respond knowing they aren't going to be losing any pay. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to quote something you said from the Columbus City Council meeting on February 22nd, 2022. And I quote, "I think the thing we want to remember is the days of the volunteers that we all see on the wall calendars and the old picture shows are gone. The need for volunteers is still with us. To be an active volunteer today, you have to be able to give time, energy, and effort for training, retention, and improvement. We can't get away from our jobs like what we used to be able to get away from. We spend more time with our families and our children and don't want to get away from them. So thinking that the call comes in and everybody drops what they need to take a run for the station or the accident scene just doesn't happen. So we need to be able to develop those 8 or 10, 12 or 14 that want to be active volunteers that our firefighters can rely on and our citizens can rely on," end quote. I believe approving of this program would be the solution to some of the problems that you stated. Approval of this program would bring the group of volunteers closer with the paid staff and might ease some of the tension between the two groups as of now. The paid staff hopefully will feel more relieved knowing that the people backing them up have received proper training and certifications. I hope you take thoughtful consideration into the chief's proposal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for picking a good quote.
We have like a minute and a half if anybody else. Very good. Then we need a motion from a
Can I
councilman.
just make a comment?
Certainly.
Regardless of which way we go here, I just want to thank you all for the job you do. It's just, I admire you all. You stand up and you do your job, and city can't exist without you. And so, however we decide, it's for the best of all the people here. But know that we truly need to have you folks as a part of this group. And thank you for risking your lives for my life, my family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Council President, I would recommend that the Columbus Fire Department be restructured by creating the Columbus Reserve Firefighters to replace the existing 4 volunteer companies.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and you may go ahead and vote. And the motion passes. Thank you, all of you who have contributed to this process, and Chief, thank you for the work you will continue to invest on this. Thank you, volunteers, for your comments tonight. We appreciate it. And with that, meeting is adjourned.